Thank you, Mansi, Ashwat, and the entire Firki team for setting up such a great day. I had the opportunity to listen into the keynote, Karthik Muralidharan, a while ago, and it was such a pertinent conversation. And I'm really excited to bring this panel together. People who have really inspired me over my journey as an educator. The theme of the conversation today is innovation in schools. And I will tell you in a minute why this theme is important and then hand it over to my panelists to introduce themselves. The NEP has set forth some really bold and ambitious goals that need to be accomplished in the coming 5 years as well as the next couple of decades. While the technological advancements have penetrated so many other sectors, unfortunately, the schools, the model of the schools have stayed largely the same at scale level for almost 2 centuries now. Sir Ken Robinson has very passionately spoken about the need to reimagine and redesign our schools. And the panelists that we have today are people who have constantly pushed the envelope on innovation in their respective spaces. And with that, I would like to hand it over to our youngest panelist, Prajwal, to introduce himself, and then we will go around in the circle.
Thank you, Bhaiya. So, hello everyone. A very good evening to all of you. My name is Prajwal Gayan, and I am a student studying in the 10th standard from the school DNMPS, which is ran by the Akanksha Foundation. In the future, I wish to become a responsible citizen and help others, just like the Akanksha Foundation has helped me. And I am really happy to attend this meeting today and looking forward to it.
Thank you, Prajwal. Shalini, please go ahead.
Okay. Hi, I'm Shalini. Shalini Sachdev. I am the school leader of KC Thakre Vidyaniketan School, which was the first Akanksha school to be started. As you know, Akanksha Foundation has 21 schools over Mumbai and Pune. And what we do over here is we try to, innovation is a word that has been used very, very often, but we are trying to build a network of innovative schools that really that are able to look at the real issues and then solve for them without the constraints. Before this, I was with the foundation with Rahul Bose, and before that I was with Pratham. I've been working, and before that I was an Akanksha teacher. So I've been working with children in the sector for about 16 years now. I've been very fortunate to have that opportunity.
Thank you, Shalini. Vishnu?
Thanks, Saurabh. Thank you for this opportunity to be a part of this wonderful panel, including Prajwal. I must say, in the season of Zoom webinars over the last 6 months, this is the first one I'm sharing with a student leader, and I'm really thrilled doing this session with all of you. A bit about my background. I've been in the field of education for the last 15 years, prior to which in my previous life, I was a management consultant, realized the mistake early on, and then got into education. For the last 12 years or so, I've been with the Heritage Group of Schools. This is a group of project-based learning schools, about 15 years old. These are mainstream CBSE schools, but we've pushed the boundaries of the CBSE curriculum into making that curriculum relevant, meaningful, and authentic. I've served in different capacities with the Heritage Group, starting from an economics teacher, head of a school, and right now I'm the director for the group of schools looking after instruction leadership and setting up of new campuses.
Thank you, Vishnu. Thank you. Shweta?
Good evening, everybody. Very, very grateful to be a part of this panel. When I started my journey as a school leader, Shalini Didi and Saurabh were my two role models to look forward to. And after 5 years being in this panel, just really grateful. I'm Shweta Sarkar. I'm the co-founder and school leader for IT schools. Prior to my school leadership journey, I was a fellow, a 2013 fellow in Pune city, taught in a government school here in grade 6th and 7th, which is when the crisis at large became a lot more clearer and a lot more personal. in short, if we look at it, we started off with waging a war at the problem, which had lack of access to secondary schools in the Pune city. In 2015, IT Schools was founded. We run free high impact secondary schools for the most under-resourced students. Our school function on a public-private partnership model, much like the charter schools in the other parts of the world. And since 2015, we've been able to expand it to 9 schools, 2 cities this year. We're serving about 2,500 students and alumni with about 170 staff members. Yeah.
Thank you, Shweta and everyone. So delving quickly into this, 3 different school models. Secondary schools, 8th, 9th, and 10th, I teach. Akanksha, K to 10. Vishnu, K to 12, fee-paying schools, yet fee-paying parents, yet in one of the best schools in the country. I want to really start with knowing from each of you, including Prajwal, what's the single biggest barrier to continue innovation at the school level from your vantage point? Just one. And would love to go ahead, Prajwal.
Sure. So for me, I think that one big barrier, which is also ignored by many people, is the fear of change people have in themselves. Because nowadays, many parents are like, if there is when we mean by innovation, we say that new methods of teaching and new methods of learning. Many parents fear that their kids may not grasp the idea, or they may not very well get going with the idea, and this may affect their studies negatively and their academics as well. So they just want to stick to the traditional ways of ideas, and they do not want to adapt to a new way of idea which is better, and so they fear the change. And I think that is a very big barrier, because they have that mindset that this new method will not work, we should only stick to the traditional method. So they don't want that innovation, they don't want that change. So I think this is a very big barrier that needs to be overcome by the parents and the teachers, and as well as the students too.
Thank you, Prajwal. Vishnu, would you like to build on that from your experience?
Absolutely. I think Prajwal stole my words, and for once, I'm really happy somebody stole my words. I think if you ask me, and after spending about 12, 13 years trying to do reform and innovation in a K-12 context, in the urban K-12 context, I have come to realize the biggest barriers, among the other several things we know of, could be policy, could be government intervention, could be several other things. But I think the biggest barrier, which nobody talks about, I think, is the mindset of parents itself. It is a hard realization I experienced in the first 3 or 4 years of our own journey. For example, when we removed, textbooks and introduced projects, and when we removed test-based assessments, road-based assessments to more real-life, authentic, deeper assessments, the first people who had a lot of concerns and worries were parents. In fact, the first year, this was in 2009, when we introduced some of the reform in the heritage schools, I remember 15-20% of the parents left the school. They just felt this is a lot of experimentation happening and we want more tradition.
Wow.
I think parents love a certain predictability and certainty, and they love experiencing what they're experienced themselves as children in their own school. Unfortunately, education, unlike medicine or any other sector, all consumers have experienced it for 14 years themselves. So everybody thinks that they know education. And I think parents definitely have a lot of fear, like Prajwal pointed out, in terms of allowing some reform and innovation, the way the children learn. The second problem also is that the higher education in our country, the entry level criteria for higher education in our country hasn't much changed over the last 20 years. So parents are also compelled to look at the high stake testing, which happens to enter higher education institutes, and they design the entire 14 years of learning experience downstream from that grade 12 examination. So the tragedy is, for one exam in grade 12, I think much of Indian parents and Indian schools keep repeating an ineffective learning problem. One last point, Saurabh, I also want to give credit to why parents do certain things, and not that I'm putting the blame squarely on the parents. I think another problem, unlike in the West, is bulk of at least 50% of children go to private schools, and these private schools depend on a fee-based system. So the incentive to do reform is also based on what parents want. And in social sectors like education or health, it's actually not a good thing for the consumer to take all the choices. You want to have a public policy stand also to make reforms happen. But because this is based on fee the parent pays, and parents is compelled by the fear of higher education, the reform has not happened so much. So that's one of the systemic challenges we also have beyond what parents think.
Such great points, Vishnu and Prajwal, connected to parent mindset. Shweta, would love to hear your thinking on what you think has been the biggest barrier at iTeach School in your role as a co-founder and leader.
Yeah. I think I'd like to, not with respect to just only IT schools, but broadly, I would say the single biggest barrier has been, I think, our inability to be able to hear a student and their voices. And in basically including their voices into building schools. We've been, be it at a policy level, be it at a system level, or the ground level, or at an intervention level, we've been very resistant, hesitant, and if I have to like sort of, say this correctly, been to some extent afraid of listening to what our students might have to say of the system we are creating for them. And this also comes from a place of, because we've all been very used to seeing compliance around us. We've grown up into a compliance system, be it school, be it home. So anything that is other than compliance just makes us very uncomfortable. And to design a system for millions of students, and to think of that, allowing a space for students to question, to raise a doubt, to question the system that you have created, to allow for some re-evaluation, that just sits, that's discomforting for a lot of the educators in the system currently. So I feel like that's been our biggest barriers, because I truly believe that students have incredible ideas that could reimagine our school education system, and we're not listening to them yet.
Thank you. Such a pertinent point, Shweta, over there about student voice. Shalini, anything that you would like to add to this? What's been the single biggest barrier to sustain innovation? I know we are struggling with the tech issues, Shalini. Sorry, I think I'm not able to hear Shalini. So I'm just going to go quickly to the next section and bring Shalini's input on that. Vishnu and Shweta, and then I will come to Prajwal in this question at the end. How are you then building and sustaining a culture that allows for innovation to stay? Like, I have been to both your schools and I'm blown away, right? Heritage, absolutely mind-blowing what you've managed to build, Vishnu, with your team. Shweta, despite all the pressures of the board exam prep, like there are a lot of, like the traditional way of thinking that you have managed to break with your staff and parents. Would love to hear, how are you going about building this culture at your school level?
You want me to go first, or I can wait for Shweta to answer?
Go for it, Vishnu.
Thank you, Shweta. So I think one of the fundamental design principles we had when we set up the heritage schools is that, it could be quite controversial, but I think kind of worked for us, is that I think children are an excuse for adults to learn and grow, which essentially means just the way we have a curriculum for children to learn, even more important than that is a curriculum for adults to unlearn. So a lot of our work starts with working with the parents and of course the teachers too. In fact, the first day the parents join our school, when they pay the fees, we give them a big contract, and an entire section of that contract deals with the minimum number of workshop hours they need to commit every year. And it's a contract. We say that there's about 14 days they got to attend every year. Of course, it's more in the initial years, and it kind of gets reduced as they move to adolescence. The idea is that they have to commit to a learning journey with the school. And we've seen that when the school invests a lot around building that understanding collectively, then parents absolutely respond, because everybody, if you appeal to their higher sense, all human beings want to reach that. It's an unmet desire, which is phenomenal. In fact, one of the reasons of our transformation of the heritage schools, we appeal to parents' higher self. They might be, they begin with the mindset of paucity, constraint, fear, competition, limited resources. But moment you start letting them see the possibilities of education, about the child's potential, they really want more and more of more meaningful learning experiences. So in the beginning, we used to take all sets of parents to Rishikesh for a 4-day retreat, for example, and a lot of the retreats around the self, helping parents question why do they want to educate the child? What is the role of a parent? What is the purpose of a child in this universe? Fundamental questions you asking the right question, parents start unfolding in it. Of course, now we don't have to take them out, because I think the culture has also become more set now. So there's a certain self-selection which happens when parents join us, which is a wrong thing. We're trying to change that. We're trying to be as inclusive as possible and help parents unfold. So my answer to your question, Saurabh, is I think when schools and school systems invest a lot working around the self of the parent, parents do rise up to that occasion for sure. And second, of course, is delivering results. Extremely important. In the first 7 years of our existence, post the transformation into a progressive school, we often said to our parents that, hey, we don't care about results because results can't define the future of our children. But I think over time, we realize it's a crime to say that in a country like India, or in any country in Asia for that matter, because for many parents and many families, it is the only legitimate way of social mobility, and we can't take that away from parents. So now our statement is, give 12 years of your child's life to us to do meaningful work. The last 2 years will ensure that they get ready for any competitive exam in this world. And when the results show, parents have absolute buy-in to whatever we do in the first 12 years of their lives.
Got it. So it's like that's the best way to navigate the tension and the compromise in between the high stakes exam, vis-a-vis still ensuring that the bulk of the learning journey has been fairly meaningful. Great. Thanks, Vishnu. Shweta, any reflections on that? How have you gone about building that culture?
I think I would say I'm still in the process of building that culture. I think what I've realized is that in the last 5 years, I might have a certain belief system around how students, what the design for the school should be. And while I have all of that idea in my head, my staff might not think the same way, and definitely our parents would not be thinking in that same line of thought. So I think a lot of work has gone into just first accepting that बच्चों के तरफ से हमें आवाज चाहिए, ये एक्सेप्ट करना both staff और parents की तरफ से बहुत जरूरी था. To give you one small example is we've been seeing over the years, we've discussed a lot, right? Parent disinvestment is a biggest barrier in our low income schools, right? And but we've never really dug deep into as to why there's so much of a gap when it comes to a low income household ka support with parents, and in a middle income and then versus a high income household. And when we sort of dug deep, and in the last 3 years, we figured out that our parents need a lot of support. Support in terms of the kind of culture that students have in school at this point of time. They are celebrated for achievements. They're acknowledged for the growth they make in the school. The teachers work with them to manage their failures. However, our parents don't know to do any of these things when they go back home. They don't know how to celebrate it. They don't know how to acknowledge things. They don't know how to manage things when they are difficult with their child. And I felt like that was an opportunity for us to explore that area. We started doing parent workshops apart from having parent teacher student meetings that informs the parent about the report cards and all. We started holding monthly parent workshops for our parents, teaching them what does we are practicing restorative culture in school. How do you translate that? How do you translate those small pieces back into their homes? They learn that skill with us. They practice it here. Um, what we've seen is that that divide is big. It's huge, and we've been going one parent at a time. We've not been able to say that all parents have been able to sort of understand that culture that our students need. But I'm positive that we've had a massive shift in terms of the number of parents who believe that our students require a certain culture back at home as well to be able to succeed in their lives. So yeah.
Thank you, Shweta. Prajwal, I would love to hear from you. What are some of the innovations that you have experienced as a student in your learning journey over the past 10 years? One or two examples, and any particular role that you played in it?
Yeah, so yeah, I wanted to talk that when we talk about innovation, for example, in our school, in our school DNMPS, uh, we do not mean technology and stuff like that, but for us, innovation are new ideas, creative ideas, new methods of teaching, and things like that. For example, in our school, when we have classes, the teachers do not only teach with only the lectures and the test books. Instead, they may give us some group activities to do. They may give us a role play to perform, and also for lower grades, they have, for example, if they have a science class and they are learning about plants, the teachers may take them to the garden and make them uh, make them pick up some plants or look at some leaves and get information from them. So that is kind of a creative idea. And also in our school, a creative idea that we had in our school was peer counseling. In that, what happens, we had students from the upper grade and students from the lower grade collaborate with each other, and they used to talk with each other on a weekly basis or whenever they wanted for 1 hour or 2 hours every week. And in that period, they used to always ask each other their problems and how they are going through school and what's happening at their home, any problems, difficulties, and they used to sit together and solve all their problems by talking with each other or having fun with each other. So this helped because the teachers may not understand students very well, but the students understand each other really, really well. So that's why the idea was very creative, and also it worked really well because after few days, the students which were involved in the peer counseling, the lower grade as well as the upper grades students, all were showing really good personal development and also academic development, and also had some good mental health too. So I think innovation should not only be focused on technology and things like that, but also the innovation should be focused on what are the ideas, how creative can you think, and how can you do something with least resources as well. So I think that is a culture of innovation in our school.
Fantastic, Prajwal. Such great insights. So, two, three big takeaways. One, importance of parental engagement and parental voice, what both Vishnu and Shweta spoke about it. Second, power of student engagement and taking them along in this. Third, innovation need not be resource intensive. It can be done in low cost, low resource environment. And it is not, innovation does not always equal technology, right? Like Prajwal shared that I think it's the idea about creative thinking. I know we have 10 minutes left, panelists. I wanted to give the opportunity for all the audience who are logging in on YouTube and Facebook to send in some of the questions. And just in case we have last 5 minutes, that can be directed towards one of you. So people who are listening to us, if you have any questions that you would like to ask our panelists, feel free to post them and we will take them in the last 3 to 4 minutes. I have one question for all of you, and Shalini, because we can see you, we will give you the first opportunity this time to go ahead. Shani, what's the one recommendation that you would like to make to the administrators or policymakers on allowing or enabling a culture of innovation at the school level for fulfillment of the vision of NEP?
One thing we do when we are innovating, we tend to throw out the bathwater. What I mean to say is that just because an innovation is required, is important, doesn't mean that we know of the power work. We have to build on what's working. So that would be one thought that I've been having while I was hearing everybody speak. That's one thought which I was that was recurring in my mind. And the other thought is that we see so much, when we're talking about a culture of innovation, what we mean is that we want teachers to build on their relationship with the students. And a beautiful example is what Prajwal just shared, because students have the answers to their own problems, to make that space. And if you call that innovation, so be it. But that's the bottom line for education. And where the NEP is concerned, a lot of what it talks about is, so much of it is already happening in small pockets. We need to figure out a way to make the dream walk on the ground. And by that, I mean that how do we turn that innovation into a system so that, it becomes a norm? How do we solutions happen? And how do we enable school leaders, again, walking that balance between what's conforming for everybody and to allow for newness to emerge? How do you walk that balance? How do you allow that autonomy to schools? And once you have identified the idea, how do you make it work? Because to make it work in a classroom, to make it work for a school, to make it work for a system, three inputs. I mean, no school may not know how to do a system, so they require help with that. And so if the system has to become a system of innovation and encourage a culture of innovation, we have to have a way to recognize what we need on the ground. What does that person need to make that into a system, right? Good ideas sit on the shelves all the time, right? How do we systematize it? How do we think through the planning phases and the resources phases and the nuts and bolts and really make it walk on the ground? Thank you, Saurabh.
Thank you. Vishnu, any reflections on this? And Shweta and Prajwal, there are some interesting questions coming up in the chat, and I will direct some of those to you both. Vishnu, any thoughts?
Saurabh, just to be right, your question is around how to make innovation sustain. Is that the question?
What's the advice that you would offer to the administrators or policymakers to be able to enable a culture of innovation and reimagination to fulfill these ambitious goals that have been laid out in NEP?
Frankly, I could be a contrarian, Saurabh. A question like, how do we realize the goals of NEP? I really don't know if innovation is the answer. I think accountability is more important than innovation at this stage of our journey as a country. And I'm not an expert at this. My experience has largely been in private, unaided schools as against public aided schools. Those are a very different ballgame altogether. But my general commentary when I look at the state of K-12 schools, private or public, is I think there is a general need for the right set of accountability. For example, I think Anustup is having a chat. I'm really interested in what he's going to talk about. Is getting the right pedagogy in the classroom is a big problem in our country, even for the best of the private schools. Because unlike the US, unlike in many of the nations where they come high on the OECD rankings, we still haven't got a collective understanding as a country on what are the pedagogical protocols you got to do in a classroom. And for me, it's more about accountability. For me, it's more about a culture of coaching, giving feedback. For me, it's a culture of continuous professional development on the craft of teaching in it. Second is around using data wisely to make continuous school improvements. If you focus on these two fundamental foundational processes, innovation is bound to happen. But if you don't have these two things, and when school systems start to innovate, which by the way, a lot of schools have tried, I think those are very expensive, and often our children pay the price.
Thank you, Vishnu, for that perspective. I think what I noticed from the chat window, there are two themes of questions that emerged, and Shweta and Prajwal, tell me if any one of you would like to address that. And one question is best answered by Vishnu. One is that currently, in the current state that we are in, how are you investing parents in online learning? And Shweta, I know iTeach has been doing that. It is being seen as one of the sort of more innovative approaches of virtual learning, and the jury is still out. But any thoughts on that? And Vishnu, one question that we probably would love to have you respond is, what's the extent to which you can actually go about investing parents in high income schools, like high fee paying schools, like all the schools that you cater to? So Shweta, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think especially this pandemic, I think we've become very close to our parents. Earlier, it was more of the students need to do well with respect to behavior or with respect to academics, and our parental engagement has been very much centered around that. But for the first time, I think we've been able to open our hearts out and minds out to just understand what they've been going through in this pandemic. And I think that has opened some of those doors for us to engage with them a lot more freely. We've, over the last 6 months, we knew that this time is going to be very difficult to engage with our parents. So we ensured that we understood first how our parents doing with respect to their economic condition at this point of time, with respect to food, health, security at their homes, and what do they need to be able to ensure that because our parents currently have to make a very tough choice between livelihood and education. It's like this time has actually forced them to choose between the both. And we've been having parent check-ins with the teachers. The advisors have been doing that. In the initial months, we've been having weekly check-ins with the parents to understand what do they need. We've been trying to sort of cater to some of those concerns that were there at that point of time. But broadly, I think giving them a space to make them feel heard, that ये है हमारा problem दीदी, अब कोई सुन नहीं रहा है हमारे उस problem को, but there's a teacher from school, and then there are principals from schools who are willing to actually give them that space to come online and just listen to it. So I think that has built a lot of trust with our parents. We still struggle with building that connection with few parents, of course, but that has made our parents believe that what they're saying right now, that the students have to show up to school, is very, very important. And I'm going to trust them on this, and I'm going to send my child to school because the didis and bhaiyas are saying so. And it's broadly that has worked out primarily over the last 5-6 months.
Thank you. Vishnu and Prajwal, we are like 1 minute out. 20 seconds, Vishnu. How do you go about gaining flexibility to invest parents?
It's a great question, Saurabh. As much as I'm a big advocate of parent involvement, but I also know that schools that listen to parents too much can become a very corporate school, and in some sense you become so customer centric that you just pander to what parents' fears are. And I've seen a lot of schools do that of late in the name of accountability, in the name of parent involvement, but it's very detrimental to parents, to students. Parents often struggle in two paradigms which schools need to change. One paradigm is that most parents are a parent of their child, but a school's paradigm is you've got to be a parent of all children in the class. You have to make the transition. Second, parents think that I'm going to be a parent for the child to get him ready for a college or a job, but a school has to expect a parent to be a parent for life, to help a child realize his or her human potential, nothing to do with careers or jobs, just subsets. But these two paradigms, to make that happen, is extremely difficult, and hence schools can't be too pandering to parents' views. In fact, school has to be loyal only to the school's vision, and parents are good stakeholders or collaborators to it. But your loyalty cannot be to the parents' desires and wishes in some sense. It's very difficult to answer this question in 20 seconds. But the bottom line is you collaborate with parents, but a school leader should always be loyal to the school's vision and not parents' fears.
Understood. Thank you. Prajwal, one summary of the whole thing. What are you taking away from this conversation about innovation in schools? And then we will close it out on that. Really quick answer.
Yeah, for this from this meeting, the one thing that I take away for school is that when the schools reopen, I think my thoughts on the ways of teaching and learning have really changed on how the school should be and how we need to involve parents and how everything will be different. So I think I'll take away that we have to adapt to change, because the world is changing and we always have to keep changing and adapting to everything that is going around. So that will be one takeaway from my side.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We're out of time. Thank you, Prajwal, Vishnu, and Shweta and Shalini for participating in this discussion. Really, really appreciate that. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to be here.